In 2006, the Nintendo Wii had taken the world by storm. Launching with titles like Red Steel and The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, people who had never touched a controller before were suddenly taking on the criminal underworld, or exploring the land of Hyrule, discovering the magic of gaming for the very first time. But amid the console's roaring debut into gaming's 7th generation, one question loomed large at Nintendo. How would Mario step into this new era? Soon, fans would finally experience the heavily anticipated third 3D Mario, but would it live up to the hype after all this time? It had been 5 long years since the last one released, and fans were eagerly awaiting his return. What they didn't know was that the development team was pushing through near impossible challenges, battling every technical and creative obstacle to make this next game the absolute best it could be. And although it was the newest experience for the time, the project had been long in development, with its origins dating all the way back to the Nintendo 64. In fact, had history played out even slightly differently, this iconic experience might have looked entirely different, or might not even have existed at all. This is Super Mario Galaxy. Welcome to Under the Spotlight. It was the turn of the century, and in the latter end of summer 2000, Nintendo was preparing to host its annual trade show at the Makuhari Messe Convention Center in Chiba, Japan. This trade show was none other than the famed SpaceWorld, their showcase for any first-party hardware, software, and experimental tech demos that were in development. The Nintendo 64 had been groundbreaking, but by the turn of the millennium, it was beginning to show its age. Sony came in guns blazing with the Japanese launch of the legendary PlayStation 2 in March of that year, while Sega had already staked their claim with the Dreamcast 2 years prior. And now, rumors swirled that tech giant Microsoft was planning their own bold entry into the console arena. Despite Nintendo's prestige as the pioneer of 3D gaming, the walls of competition were rapidly closing in. Even though Nintendo's entry into the 6th generation came later than its rivals, their developers were no strangers to the challenges ahead, nor the competition closing in on both sides. Work on their next console, internally dubbed Project Dolphin, had quietly begun not long after the Nintendo 64's release, as early as 1998. So by the time SpaceWorld arrived on August 24th, 2000, the project was practically complete. But the closer they got to the reveal of their new hardware, the more intimidating the shadows of Sega, Sony, and now Microsoft would grow. But Nintendo had never been a company defined by specs or horsepower. Their legacy was built on innovation, on redefining what it meant to play. Because no matter how powerful the hardware, a console is only as strong as the experiences it delivers. Driven by that philosophy, they confidently took to the stage, ready to prove what their new hardware could truly do. To showcase what the 6th generation would look like through their lens, Nintendo prepared a series of ambitious tech demos, real-time displays of what the GameCube was truly capable of. While several notable demos made their debut at this event, including a Legend of Zelda demonstration that inspired Twilight Princess and a Metroid demo that would later on become Prime, there was one in particular that fans couldn't help but notice. Just as the Nintendo 64 had been a groundbreaking success, so too was Super Mario 64, and rumors had long been circulating that Nintendo may be developing a sequel to the groundbreaking 3D platformer. As fate would have it, they were, or at least they wanted to. Nintendo had long imagined a new Mario adventure, this time for the 64DD, that would continue the story of the original game, but ambition alone wouldn't save the 64 add-on, and thanks to its commercial failure, it was pulled from store shelves before any significant game development could begin. With its host console no longer in production, the fabled Super Mario 128 was seemingly dead, quietly erased from Nintendo's plans, surviving only as a fragment of what fans once hoped to see. Until SpaceWorld 2000. As people filled the showroom and the event roared to life, the air crackled with anticipation. Demos flashed across screens, scattering vivid colors across the floor, while eager fans continued to pour in with wide-eyed excitement, hungry for a glimpse of what Nintendo's future would hold. There were countless impressive tech demos and upcoming games on display, including, among those already mentioned, the heavily anticipated Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2. Yet, among Among the many first looks at titles that would go on to shape the GameCube's identity, one presentation carried a special weight. Something thought long forgotten had, by some miracle, been brought back into the light. Super Mario 128. It wasn't just a concept anymore, it was real. A fully realized, fully functioning tech demo built to showcase the computing power of Nintendo's next console, the GameCube. On screen, dozens of Mario figures moved independently across the constantly shifting spherical platform, each interacting seamlessly with one another and the environment. Complex physics simulations ran in real time, collisions occurred naturally, and every animation flowed with an incredible fluidity, demonstrating possibilities never before attempted or even imagined in a 3D Mario game. Now, it wasn't exactly what fans had been asking for, but the fact that Nintendo chose to name the demo after the lost sequel showed they understood the demand. Players were ready for another 3D Mario adventure, and while what was being presented wasn't necessarily the beginnings of a new game, the fact Nintendo bothered to make anything at all had rekindled a spark of hope for the sequel. Yet behind the scenes, not everyone shared that optimism. Within Nintendo's own offices, seeds of doubt had already begun to take root. Director Yoshiaki Koizumi questioned whether such an ambitious concept could ever be realized as a full game, even with the GameCube's enhanced processing power. The story goes back to the year 2000. It was during the GameCube presentation event where we revealed a demo software called Mario 128. I was the director of that demo, and after the event, I kept thinking of ways of somehow turning that system used in Mario 128 into a product. However, I had always thought that realizing this would be close to impossible. He continues, saying he thought it impossible for technical reasons. In Mario 128, the platform was built in the shape of a flying saucer, but in order to change that platform into a spherical shape where Mario could freely roam around, it would require a high level of technical expertise. This doubt would weigh heavy on Koizumi's mind, and despite the demo's overwhelmingly positive reception, the project remained dormant. Its bold, ambitious ideas were deemed too advanced for the era, and 128 was once again shelved, quietly vanishing from view. Fans who had clung to the dream of a true sequel began to lose all hope, believing that both a Super Mario 64 sequel and Miyamoto's daring concept of traversable spherical worlds would never see the light of day. But their disappointment wouldn't last forever. Even though Koizumi had no intention of tackling the colossal, seemingly unattainable task of creating such complex environments, Nintendo was determined to meet fans halfway and deliver the 3D Mario they had been waiting for. And Koizumi was exactly who Miyamoto wanted to lead the way. The opportunity to lead a new Mario title under the personal encouragement of Shigeru Miyamoto himself was too great to ignore that even his colleagues couldn't deny their excitement of such a monumental project. Yet Koizumi still wrestled with doubt, but Miyamoto's faith in him was unshakable. So with hesitation in his heart, but determination in his step, Koizumi and his team began their journey. One he feared might end in failure, yet one destined to redefine Mario forever. And though his doubt lingered, Koizumi knew the strength of the team around him. These were developers who, once set on a path, could move mountains. No matter how deep his uncertainty ran, their resolve burned brighter. And in just 2 short years, their efforts would give rise to a bold new adventure that answered the call for another 3D Mario, marking the next step toward realizing the grand vision of Miyamoto.
Super Mario Sunshine! Woohoo!
Super Mario Sunshine arrived on the GameCube in 2002 and bore little direct connection to Super Mario 128, though traces of the demonstration lingered within its design, from the intricate physics of moving platforms to the early exploration of dynamic layered environments. It was as if Koizumi, haunted by the challenge of Miyamoto's vision, was quietly testing the waters, searching for the confidence and understanding required to make the impossible possible. Though Though Sunshine delivered a vibrant, memorable adventure, it was never meant to be the final realization of Miyamoto's ambitious vision. Its experiments were impressive, but merely stepping stones, small hints of what was to come. Because behind the scenes, Koizumi and his team were mastering their craft and subtly laying the groundwork for a project that would take Mario far beyond the shores of Isle Delfino. The spirit of Mario 128 had not faded. It was only biding its time, waiting for its moment to awaken and reshape the galaxy itself. By 2005, Super Mario Sunshine had cemented itself as a must-have title for GameCube owners, and EAD Tokyo had proven their worth as one of Nintendo's rising studios, following up with the innovative Donkey Kong Jungle Beat in 2004. Not only was their reputation growing among the community, but their skill and confidence as developers was rapidly improving, giving Miyamoto renewed confidence that the time has finally come. His long-held vision wasn't just a dream anymore, it was within reach, and this time he wouldn't back down. Not even when his close friend and colleague, the late and legendary Satoru Iwata, expressed doubts about sending Mario into space. I had heard about the spherical platforms from Miyamoto-san more than 5 years ago, though at the time I didn't quite understand why having spherical platforms would be so groundbreaking. At the time, I felt the same way. It sounded interesting, but I wasn't sure whether or not it would be worth the effort. Thinking back, this probably was a thought that was shared by everyone on the staff, but Miyamoto-san kept saying over and over again that he wanted to make it happen. Discussions for their next title began relatively soon after Jungle Beat's release, and after several years spent working on established franchises, the team at EAD Tokyo had their hearts set on something original. Takao Shimizu recalled, "After we were finished developing Donkey Kong Jungle Beat for the GameCube, we had some time to plan what our next game would be. I had suggested creating a new original game on our own, but then Miyamoto-san said in a rather sad tone, 'I wish you could make a game with Nintendo characters.' And they didn't need to ask which character he meant. They already knew, and deep down, they also knew there was no refusing him. Miyamoto was determined, through hell or high water, to see his ambitious idea through. Koizumi remained skeptical, yet he had begun to believe that, against all odds, the team had reached a point where they could actually pull off Miyamoto's improbable concept. He had come to know them well over the course of developing Jungle Beat and Sunshine, and was growing confident in the improbable becoming their reality. But he also understood that his own confidence wasn't enough. Such a monumental decision required the input of the entire team. I asked the staff members for their opinions, and somebody on the team said he wanted us to use our skills to make the next Mario game with our hands. I got to know the staff well enough by then, and I thought, if it was this team, we may just be able to tackle the new and difficult challenge of making spherical platforms work. Little did he know, he was both entirely right and completely wrong. With everyone on board, the revolutionary Mario experience officially entered development, and all things considered, the first few months went surprisingly smoothly. Though the prototype took an unusually long 3 months to complete, it proved to Miyamoto, Koizumi, and the rest of the team at EAD Tokyo that this concept was entirely feasible, a challenge that they could, without a shadow of a doubt, overcome. Yet this newfound confidence would prove fleeting. As the deeper galaxy entered development, the more uncertain and overwhelmed EAD Tokyo would become. Amid the gathering storm, Koizumi couldn't shake the feeling that he was navigating uncharted territory, far beyond anything he had faced before. He knew Mario inside and out, and Miyamoto had expressed faith in his abilities countless times. Yet this project was nothing like Sunshine. The mountain before them was colossal, and they were climbing it blind, with no map, no guide, and no clear path forward. He knew he and his team were in far over their heads, and no matter how confident they felt, this was not a challenge that they could face alone. They needed the guidance of someone who had traveled this road before, wisdom that could serve as their lifeline. They needed Miyamoto's help. Yet even with his mentor's guidance, Koizumi's stubborn streak often flared, putting him in direct conflict with Miyamoto and testing the limits of their collaboration. As Koizumi recalled, he would clearly explain explain to me why his suggestions were better, and at times he would even understand my point of view, and we would decide to go with what I was saying. This was a long time ago, but there was a time that I just didn't budge no matter what he did. But despite their clashes, a deep understanding lingered between them. Koizumi's goal was to craft the best Mario title EAD Tokyo could deliver for the Wii, and Miyamoto wanted the best for Mario. Recognizing that determination, Miyamoto urged Koizumi to trust the guidance of the old guy to ensure that they could work together effectively and craft the greatest Mario game possible. This mutual understanding and cooperation provided an anchor, but it was no shield against the chaos waiting just over the horizon. As the deadline approached, problems began to escalate at an alarming pace. Every critical decision seemed to spawn two more of even higher complexity. And to make matters worse, playtesters and even some developers were experiencing bouts of motion sickness from traversing even the simplest level designs. The stakes were mounting, and the team's ambition was beginning to collide with the limits of reality. But Miyamoto had walked this path countless times before. He knew the greatest masterpieces weren't created in a single stroke and could never be rushed. The best games were forged through trial and error. Messy at first, but gradually refined into something extraordinary. Most importantly, they were crafted with patience. He understood that the chaos the team faced now wasn't a setback, but a necessary step in transforming their ambition into something truly remarkable. So in order to save the project, he would announce on behalf of the studio that the game unfortunately would be delayed another year, missing its intended launch alongside the Nintendo Wii so it could receive the extra polish and care that he believed Nintendo fans deserved. Through hell or high water, they pressed on, pouring every last drop of effort into the game, yet the mounting challenges seemed determined to drag them under. So Miyamoto did what he knew he needed to do. His dream was at his fingertips, and there was a studio fighting tooth and nail to see that dream through. Without hesitation, he paused all his immediate business, packed his bags, and caught the next flight headed to Tokyo. After 2 years of relentless development and an added year-long delay, Super Mario Galaxy finally descended onto the Nintendo Wii on November 12, 2007. And what emerged wasn't just another Mario adventure, but one of the most awe-inspiring, transformative experiences in the history of gaming. The adventure begins in chaos. The moment you gain control, you learn that Bowser is back once more, and this time his ambition is reaching astronomical proportions. As you arrive, he descends upon the Mushroom Kingdom under the cover of darkness, tears Peach's castle from the very ground it lay on, like it's the third act of Age of Ultron, and absolutely launches it into the depths of space. His goal? To seize the grand stars and gain celestial powers capable of reshaping entire galaxies and bending worlds to his will. You, as Mario, must traverse a universe bursting with wonder, forge unlikely alliances, tackle inventive and satisfying challenges, race against daring foes, and confront formidable enemies, all to stop Bowser from claiming total dominion over the cosmos. If you've played a Mario game before, especially 64, you're gonna feel right at home in Galaxy. Much of the same formula from the 64 classic has made its way here. As soon as you take control of Mario, it kinda feels like stepping back into the world that so many of us grew up exploring. The vibrant, whimsical charm of Mario's world is now layered with a subtle realism. There's detailed stitching on Mario's overalls, soft atmospheric lighting, and a depth that makes this Mushroom Kingdom feel as though it's leapt from the screen into real life. Everything about it whispers familiarity, the comfort of a new but recognizable journey. And for a moment, it feels like you're about to embark on another classic Mario adventure. Until the plot unfolds, the curtain is drawn, and what lies ahead is revealed to not just be a simple return, but a cosmic odyssey absolutely no one saw coming. You see, what makes Galaxy truly special, if you didn't already know, isn't just the graphics, arguably impressive for a Wii title, and it's not even the soundtrack, despite it marking the first time a full orchestral score was featured in a Mario game. Hell, it isn't even for the surprisingly fun combat or any of the many memorable boss fights that give this game the stellar reputation it deserves. What sets Galaxy apart as the ultimate ultimate Mario experience is that it finally brought to life one of Miyamoto's boldest ideas and executed it perfectly. Fully traversable spherical environments. Put simply, outside of very specific situations, like when there's a black hole resting at the core of a platform, it's nearly impossible to fall off a planet. Each one exists as its own little world, independent from the others no matter how many make up a level, and feature their own gravitational pull, dramatically influencing how Mario moves and how you chart your path from start to finish. This unique physics system forces you to rethink everything you know about momentum, positioning, and navigation, opening up countless ways to traverse each world and solve its puzzles. For better or worse, the stars are quite literally your limit when it comes to movement in Super Mario Galaxy, and that freedom makes every run feel distinct and every solution a little bit different. As you collect the game's total 120 power stars, this mechanic, along with the usual creativity synonymous with a Mario game, transforms each level into a literal playground of endless opportunity, a space where you can easily get lost as every route, puzzle, and solution feels fresh and unpredictable, no matter how many times you have to return to it. Growing up, I played a lot of Mario. My mom was, and still is, a huge fan of the series, and if there was any game we were allowed to have in the house, it was Mario. From the original Super Mario Bros. To Super Mario World, the plumber in red was a constant part of my childhood, and while many of his other titles do hold significant merit, Super Mario Galaxy stands out to me as the definitive Mario experience, the one that shaped not just my love for games, but who I am today. And among the many amazing games I've played over the years, it's among the very few I can say with certainty is an absolute masterpiece. One of the issues I had in writing the script for this video was how I would best discuss the gameplay. As much as I could easily ramble on about how amazing this game is and bore you with every specific detail, I'm not going to. Not because I don't want to, or am trying to gatekeep you or anything that cringy, but because I feel my words could never do Galaxy the justice it deserves. It set a standard few experiences have ever matched, securing its rightful place among the legends of gaming history and leaving an incredible legacy in its wake. Until Nintendo went and f***ed it up. On September 18th, 2020, Nintendo commemorated the 35th anniversary of Super Mario with what seemed like a dream come true, a triple collection titled Super Mario 3D All-Stars. For the actually reasonable cost of $60, you got the holy trinity of 3D Mario adventures that helped define the franchise: Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy. For a brief moment, it felt like Nintendo had finally cracked the code on how to honor their legacy. Unfortunately, that feeling vanished as quickly as it came, because in March 2021, barely a year into the game's existence, Nintendo would pull the plug, halting production and digital sales of the game for good. It was a sobering glimpse into the company's new era, one where scarcity replaced celebration, and the warmth of Iwata's vision gave way to a colder, more corporate Nintendo. And in the wake of this new era, millions of fans were left behind, unable to revisit the worlds that once defined them. Sure, the collector in me loves owning what's considered by many a Switch holy grail, but the gamer in me can't help feeling disappointed. Even as a fan, I have my reservations with Nintendo, from their post-Reggie Wata business practices to how they treat their communities like the Smash community, but this one stings differently. So many fans never got a fair shot at this game, and without it, you can't play any of these titles within Nintendo's ecosystem outside of their original hardware. Now, if you're willing, you could shell out for a Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack membership, which at the moment only gives you one of the 3 games, but unless you own 3D All-Stars or settle for NSO emulation, you'll never be able to play the full 3D Mario trilogy on your Switch or Switch 2. But if I'm being honest, I don't know if that's a bad thing, because even if the game were more readily available, I'm not sure I'd recommend it, at least not for Super Mario Galaxy alone. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you shouldn't get 3D All-Stars if you don't want to. It's your life. Literally do whatever you want, as long as you're not hurting somebody. Who cares? Because owning a copy does have its perks. Of course, at the moment, it's retaining value, but more importantly, the gameplay for the most part isn't actually that bad. The 64 and Sunshine experiences are absolutely incredible and feel right at home on Nintendo Switch. And when it comes to Galaxy, it does a good enough job to deliver a fun, playable experience, but it's nowhere near the experience you get from playing it natively on the Wii. I will give credit where credit's due, especially because it's great seeing one of my all-time favorite games get a little extra love. Nintendo did make some solid improvements in All-Stars Galaxy. Where the original title ran at a crisp 480p, 3D All-Stars bumps that resolution up to a full 1080p, giving the textures and art direction a much needed extra level of polish and shine. Not only do the visuals benefit, but the gameplay got a bit of TLC as well. Wii Remote and Nunchuck controls translate surprisingly well to a pair of Joy-Cons, and there's even a few appreciated accessibility tweaks, like being able to attack with the Y button, or the ability to recenter your cursor with a quick tap of R. And if that wasn't enough, the game now runs at a smooth 60 FPS with significantly reduced load times, both of which make a massive difference in your overall experience. I'll admit, all of these improvements are fantastic, and every single one of them is appreciated, but the longer you spend with All-Stars Galaxy, the more the shine starts to fade and the cracks begin to show, making it clear that this version just doesn't capture the same magic as the original. The controls are great for the most part and generally quite responsive, but they can feel incredibly lacking in certain scenarios, especially if you prefer the Pro Controller, particularly when using motion controls. On anything other than Joy-Cons, the motion controls feel unnatural. Whenever you're trying to use motion features to attack or grab onto a star bubble with the Pro Controller, it begins to show its lack of prowess very quick. Joy-Cons emulate a Wii Remote with near perfect accuracy, while the Pro Controller feels like you spilled your brain on the floor and are trying to clean it up with the butt end of a spoon that doesn't even exist. To be fair, anything can be learned, mastered, and adapted to in time, and controller preference is subjective, but if you're anything like me, you probably don't care at all about the docked experience, and if you're really like me, you only added that to this section to pad for time, because what we're focused on is how Galaxy plays in handheld mode. The answer, miserably. Now, I don't know about you, but this is one of the smoothest brain decisions of all time. Being able to use the Switch's touchscreen as an alternative way to interact with motion controls is genuinely a clever concept, but not when it's implemented in the most inconvenient way possible. This just forces you into this awkward stop and go cycle where you poke the screen, grab a few star bits, then return to the controller over and over and over again, causing an experience akin to riding shotgun with someone who's driving stick for the very first time.
I'm letting my foot off the clutch just to cause a little bit of friction. Oh, wait, I stalled the car.
It's clunky, distracting, and absolutely kills the pacing of your experience. Now again, I will give credit where credit is due. The docked experience, even at its worst, still captures enough of Galaxy's original magic to make it a fun and nostalgic ride, and it's a great way for a new generation to experience this game. But if your dream was to finally take Galaxy on the go, technically yes, it's playable, and you can complete the game as is. I'm close to doing so myself, but it's far from ideal. And if I'm being honest, it's not an experience that lives up to Nintendo's seal of quality, and it sure as hell doesn't earn my seal of recommendation. Its experience is nowhere near the same quality that Galaxy offered on the Wii over a decade ago. And despite the improvements Nintendo made, they quickly fade into the background when the least enjoyable way to play the game just so happens to be the main reason you'd pay for Galaxy on Switch in the first place. And unfortunately, the same can be said for the Double Pack. Released only 2 days ago, as of my chubby ass fingies typing this part of the script, the Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 Double Pack dropped on October 2nd, 2025. And by the time I finished typing this part of the script, it had already dug my disappointment even deeper, shattering the last shred of cope I'd been clinging to that maybe Nintendo still has a soul. Every single issue found in the 3D All-Stars version is still here, untouched, unresolved, and just as frustrating. The same awkward control schemes, the same clunky pointer interactions, and yes, the same miserable handheld experience is present and untouched, as if this title is nothing more than a regurgitation of what they sold to us only a few years ago. Somehow, in certain spots, it even manages to look worse. There are moments where textures feel muddier, lighting feels flatter, and the overall presentation loses that level of polish that made Galaxy's art direction shine in the first place. I find it almost poetic that the definitive modern version of Galaxy ended up being the most disappointing one. This could have been a celebration, as those of us who grew up with these games welcomed a new era of gamers ready to experience everything we did over a decade ago. A truly definitive release that proudly carried the torch of a game that defined a generation. Instead, it feels like a rushed repackaging, a hollow echo of the brilliance that once set the standard for 3D platformers. For a studio known for innovation and care, this treatment feels careless, even cynical. All the magic, polish, and genius that made Galaxy unforgettable has been reduced to a hollow echo, much like Nintendo, a ghost of what it used to be. Though the modern re-releases of Super Mario Galaxy may not offer a perfect experience, at their core, they're still Super Mario Galaxy, and I couldn't be happier to see it given a second life. I was honestly beginning to think that the game had been forgotten, overshadowed by titles like Odyssey or the hype surrounding whatever Nintendo has planned for Switch 2. But as proven, that couldn't be further from the truth. So many people are finally getting the chance to experience what I consider the absolute pinnacle of platform gaming for the very first time, and in the end, that's all that matters. If I were to give my 2 cents on which version I feel is the optimal to play, it comes down to your situation. If you don't have a Nintendo Wii, but do own a Nintendo Switch, the Galaxy Double Pack is perfectly serviceable. While not my preferred way to play, this version, whether found in the Double Pack or even 3D All-Stars, succeeds where it counts and makes for a solid way to experience Super Mario Galaxy, even if it doesn't quite match the magic of the original. In almost every other case, though, I'd honestly recommend the Nintendo Wii version. The experience is far more consistent on Wii and at a fraction of the cost. Don't have a Wii? That's the best part. You can grab a Wii system, a controller, and a copy of Galaxy for roughly the same price as the MSRP of the Double Pack or the aftermarket cost of 3D All-Stars. For a little more, you could even add Super Mario Galaxy 2 and have the full setup on original hardware. Of course, the secondhand market can be unpredictable, and if that matters to you, just go for the Switch version. At the end of the day, it's your game, and it's really not that deep. But if you want the best possible Galaxy experience, an HDMI adapter and some decade-old hardware can absolutely get you there, sometimes cheaper than the modern alternatives. In my neck of the woods, it costs around $100 before taxes to get the Galaxy Double Pack, and about $140 if I were searching the aftermarket for 3D All-Stars. But with some patience and a little bit of searching, you could easily find a Nintendo Wii with cables and controller included, sometimes even a game or two, for $60 to $75 in my case. And after another $60 for 2 mint complete copies of Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, you now have a fully game-ready setup for an all-original Super Mario Galaxy experience. But in the end, it truly doesn't matter. The console you play it on and the controller you use is absolutely irrelevant. The experience held within the confines of Super Mario Galaxy far outweigh any of the cons that stand in your way. No matter what, just promise me this: you'll like, comment, and subscribe, and however you end up doing it, you'll go and play some Super Mario Galaxy.
のビデオテープで任天堂のテレビゲームがどのようにして出来上がるかがご理解いただけたと思います。ありがとうございました。